actual cabinet themselves, upgraded filtration. I would go through all of it and educate the consumer on all of it.
And again, I think the importance there is because I think it is a holistic approach, right? I mean, I'm so happy to hear you say that because it really is a holistic approach.
Nowadays, you got apps where you just scan somebody's driver's license and like that,
Yeah.
you go 60 seconds.
So give us an example of something you found and how you approached your homeowner notification. How did you let them know? Did you use pictures? Just kind of go into a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe give us a couple examples.
Yeah. So there's it really depended on the situation, right? Depends on the application, depends on if it's something the homeowner can get to easily, if it's in the garage, like, so I would always go in and I would take everything apart, right? Like, so I'd take all the panels off the equipment and get it to where it's very easily exposed, because you're doing maintenance, you're going to clean it out real good. And when I would get to that point, if I noticed mildew or bacteria growth, which would in Florida is probably 60-70% of the time, I mean, it's pretty common. When the panels are off, I would get the customer and I would show them. I would take we had little pre-moistened wipes and I'd bring them out there. I'd just say, hey, I just want to show you this stuff that's inside the unit here and make sure that you're aware of it. This isn't something that me just wiping it out of the unit while I'm here today is going to stop it from coming back. And I want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. And I would clean it out, with them present. And so they could see it. Yeah. And that would open up conversation, well, what is this? What causes this?
What caused it? Right. I was going to, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and so organically, just by going through that process, they'll be like, well, what causes this? I'm like, well, usually poor filtration obviously is one of the big factors. But sometimes they had good filters and I would just say, look, you live in a humid place. This is Florida. This is a cold, dark, moist place where mildew thrives. There's not a whole lot you can do, and then so usually the next question, well, how can we stop it? And so we just open that conversation.
Yeah.
What can we do to stop it? And then it would open the conversation of obviously indoor air quality, open up filtration, UV lights, induct purifiers.
Did you sell whole home dehumidification along the way too? Like,
the whole home. Yep. That was absolutely part of it. It was, so I would present it as a whole package, right? And look at the whole thing and then play takeaway. If the customer didn't want to go all the way in on everything, sometimes they did, right? Sometimes customers like, look, I don't want to, have any concern with my indoor breathing air. Again, little Johnny's got allergies or I have COPD or whatever the case may be. I want to do the best that I can do, in here. So it'd be, dehumidifiers, induct purifiers, UV lights in the actual cabinet themselves, upgraded filtration. I would go through all of it and educate the consumer on all of it.
And again, I think the importance there is because I think it is a holistic approach, right? I mean, I'm so happy to hear you say that because it really is a holistic approach, and one solution might not cover all the different issues that they're having, right? So there's a need for multiple solutions, probably a lot of the cases.
Most times there is. I mean, in my personal opinion, in my professional experience, I think that you should offer everything every single time and then play takeaway in the event that they don't want to spend a certain amount of money, and then as a technician, what I would do is I would use, again, my professional experience to point out, an area that may be in more need than another. If they didn't want to, obviously you get into putting in dehumidifiers on top of IAQ packages, you could be $5,000-$10,000 into this thing real quick. But if they didn't want to do that, I would back off of dehumidifier, right? And then I would go look at what does it look like to put in, an induct purifier in conjunction with some UV lights and a filter. And an upgraded filter system, and look at what they would, the budget would always be the big pushback. That was always the big thing. But then I took it a step further and I sold IAQ with financing.
I was going to ask you that actually. Yeah.
I sold an abundance of IAQ with financing. I mean, it made it so simple. They had 12-month, interest-free minimum payments, deferred interest, and it'd be, $150, $200 a month. And people didn't really shake a stick at that.
That's such an important point because again, I think the stigma in our trade is, financing is associated with new equipment change outs, right? And people don't understand. I don't want to, many people do, but there's a large portion of the population that doesn't understand. Yeah, you can use financing for all these
Yeah.
enhancements, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And
that's
I was
one.
back before it was like this is 2007, 2008. I mean, this is many years ago, long before IAQ was very popular. And back then, they didn't have the finance. They had it as an option, but it wasn't set up to where we were using it, but they could finance equipment. Well, I mentioned, I'm like, well, what if we did this with IAQ? And they're like, well, I don't know if we could do that. Well, they went to the finance company and found out, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. And so they came back in, and back then it was a very mundane process where you had carbon copy sheets and you had to call in and you had to go through. Nowadays, you got apps where you just scan somebody's driver's license and like that, you go
Yeah.
60 seconds. You
It's
got to,
it's amazing, right? I mean, even if the contractor didn't have financing to offer, any homeowner could literally pull up American Express, PayPal, you name it, like, and they could in 5 minutes can have, financing and no
yeah,
problem on their own.
yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So it sounds like bundling was a big part of your deal too, right? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
offered.
because you have three levels of contamination, right? So you don't
Mhm.
have just one. So I would always present all three levels of contamination and go through the features and benefits of the different products that we had that we could offer. And coincidentally, it was dust free. It was the manufacturer that we used back then. I never thought I'd be the rep for dust free this many years later, but here I am. But yeah, bundling was very much the approach every time. And in the event that they didn't want to pursue, spending, I think the average ticket that I had was somewhere around like 22 or $2,300, something like that. Then I would look at, maybe they didn't want to do the full dehumidifier and induct purifier. I would just back down to sometimes just be a single light stick, right? Like maybe they'd have tons of mildew underneath the coil and I'd get it all cleaned out and put a light stick under the coil, and it'd be, I think we charged about $500 or something like that, $600 back then. Simple solution,